everyone. Welcome to episode 5, I think, of the NoScore review show. I am your host, Nick. Today we are reviewing HBO's House of the Dragon, the prequel show to Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. And I am joined by my guest, Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hello,
He is
Nick.
here in
Hello,
all
listeners.
of his webcam goodness today.
It's working. I don't know. I didn't do anything different this time, but clearly it's working. So
it's clearly working, and it's good to actually see you and not have to just picture you in my mind while
no more random photos to be used instead.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's just jump right into our general thoughts, I guess, of House of the Dragon. Do you want to kick things off, Matt?
All right. I think just to start, I enjoyed it. What can I say? I didn't go into it with many expectations, as I'm sure a lot of people did the same. Mm-hmm. Just after what we were left with at the end of Game of Thrones, there wasn't really much hype going around it. I mean, the trailers were dropped quite a while in advance, but they didn't really hit a lot of traction online. Totally. But I was very pleasantly surprised by the pilot, and it made me, invested enough to stick around through the next couple episodes, which I didn't enjoy as much. But then I found throughout the season, it really picked up as time went on. Mm-hmm. Although I do have some thoughts about the ending, which we will we'll get around to at the end. But at the end of the day, I liked it. I think it was a very good first season, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
What a comeback for the Game of Thrones franchise, I guess you could call it.
Right.
Because season 8 was subpar, to say the least, to be generous.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say the fan base was outraged with how they handled things on a myriad of fronts. Yeah,
just a little bit. Just a teeny bit.
So yeah, it's a very strong start and a stronger comeback, I would say, if nothing else.
Oh, for sure. I think a lot of people
exact same boat with you. Yeah, totally. I was like, why is this being made? How are we gonna keep beating this dead horse after what we just witnessed? But true. I'm happy to be wrong. I very much enjoyed this season of House of the Dragon. It was fantastic characters, intriguing plot lines that are, there wasn't a ton of complexity to the story. It was pretty straightforward for the most part, and we just delved into characters, I think, more so. So yeah, I guess we've kind of covered expectations, right? We weren't really expecting much, but we were kind of blown away with what we got.
I think that was a good assessment.
What were some of your highlights and lowlights for the show?
I think as for highlights, definitely the C-section scene stands out because not that I was like, oh yeah, I loved watching that. That was fun.
Oh yeah, screw that woman.
But it was like, damn, that's one way to start off your show, right?
Totally.
You set the tone, and they really surprised people because from the trailers and the promotional material and everything that you see the mother in it, in the photo when you're on HBO Max or Crave or whatever, she's standing there in the promo image. So you're like, oh, this is going to be a major player, and then boom, fucking dies first episode. And you're like, okay, all right, that's interesting. And then as far as other highlights, definitely seeing Viserys walk into the throne room in episode 8.
That was
and just the work that the makeup team did on him,
Oh
And
man.
his performance, the way that his character transforms throughout the season, is such a joy to watch. Because in the beginning, you kind of like, it sets you up to kind of be like, oh, who's this fucking guy? Like, oh, he's
Yeah.
just sort of like this wishy-washy whatever kind of king. But then you really start to feel for him, and especially when it gets to those later few episodes, you really, you're feeling the hurt along with the rest of the family and everybody that's there, because
Totally.
you've come to like this guy over the course of the season, and he's just doing the best he can. But the cards are stacked against him, and he's kind of the only person at that point that was kind of holding the realm together. And then, as we saw with his death, immediately
Yeah.
just chaos
Totally.
went out.
Yeah, at the end of the first episode, I almost was more in the camp of like disliking him and thinking like he would be the bad guy or whatever, or one
Yeah.
of them. Because like with the judgment call in the birth, it's like he just made a bad call. It wasn't necessarily he had any sort of
Yeah, there wasn't
ill
malice. He
will.
didn't want
Yeah,
his wife to die,
yeah.
obviously.
He
Like, he
just
wanted them
was
both to
faced
live.
with a tough decision, right? So yeah, it was a welcome surprise to see how much we ended up feeling for him, and how like heart wrenching that throne room scene was when he
Oh,
like bursts in. It's like,
and I even
damn.
heard that the part when he drops the crown and then Damon walks over and picks it up, allegedly that was unscripted. And it
Ooh, if
was
that's
just
true.
something
Big
that
if
Matt
true.
Smith decided to go in, and I think that was a fantastic touch for both of their characters.
Totally, yeah. That was such a great moment. Um, those are kind of your big highlights. What were some of
Those are
your
my big highlights.
what are some big lowlights, Matt?
I do have a few.
Okay.
Also, I just want to add in one more quick highlight.
Okay. Sure.
I thought the introduction of the crab feeder in episode 2, with that
Yeah.
opening scene of shit going down on the beach, and then the closing scene of that episode when they do the reveal, and it's the beautiful shots out on the beach, and then the slow reveal of the crab feeder's mask. I thought that was awesome, and it was a great character reveal and incredible cinematography. Some of the best shots, I think, of the whole season were in that episode.
Totally.
But then leading up to one of my biggest lowlights, I thought, was the battle in the Stepstones.
Okay.
I was not a big fan. Um, and
Interesting.
it was more for what I was worried about in the future, because in the first like 3 episodes, there's a lot of like battles and gore and stuff going down. So I was thinking like, oh man, if we're going all out of the gate with all this stuff in the first 3 episodes, like where do you go from here? Like, what are we building up to?
Right.
At this point, there's no real connection to the characters. You're kind of figuring out who these people are. And at this point, you kind of don't like Damon, because he's sort of being framed as the antagonist in the
Yeah.
first few episodes. And so by the time, you get to the Stepstones and he's in this big battle, you're like, okay. And the time
Right.
jump as well added into it was like, the first time that happens as well sort of throws the audience for a loop. As
Mhm.
time goes on, you sort of get used to it. But I just thought that was playing some of their cards a little bit too early. And then as the season went on, there wasn't really anything spectacle wise that I think topped it. So that sort of proved my fear correct in a way, where I was expecting the season to end on a big thing. And
Right.
well, in a way, it kind of did end in a
Yeah.
big thing with the dragon chase.
Mhm.
That is also one of my second lowlights, where
Really?
I did not like. I thought it looked really
Oh.
not good. I
Oh wow. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
I thought that, for one, it has never looked good when they've tried to have dragon riding in a close up,
Okay.
because just matching the live action characters to the CG dragons, especially with so much movement going on, the motion
Yeah.
blur just feels off because it's not perfectly matched together. And then when you add in all of this fake CG rain, that it's just like, it's just, what I'm like, what's going on? I can't see anything. It already looks bad, but it's looking worse with this fake storm that you've got in the background. And it was just like, I was like, that's how we're going to end the season. Like, that's the big thing, is just watching these people fly through the dark in the rain. And I was kind of
Very
let down by that.
underwhelming for you.
It was underwhelming as a finale. That would have been a decent, like, penultimate thing to happen in episode 9, maybe. Or maybe even have something that happened at the beginning of the episode. But having that be the ending, especially compared to some of the big hits that had come in the previous 2 episodes, like we talked about Viserys' death, and even when Rhaenys breaks through the sept with her dragon.
I was just about to say, like, I actually think comparing the last 2 episodes, I think the second last episode was a little more intriguing, you know?
Yeah.
Because like the finale almost just felt like a supplementary to episode 8, right? Or episode 9, I guess. And it felt like we should have got at least one more after that, and then it like builds up again, right? And there's this big climactic event or whatever.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Oh, well. You didn't like. So I watched the finale twice because I was catching up the last 2 episodes with my girlfriend. She hadn't watched them yet. And having seen it twice, I'm still like, I still enjoyed it a lot. Like, I think the storm helped what, like, lack of CGI was there. I wasn't too. I think the emotional stakes too did a lot for me, like keeping me distracted, I guess you could say. Like, I was more invested in the stakes of what this was actually like meaning, rather than focusing too much on what it actually looked like. But what was there, I really enjoyed. Like, when they break through the clouds, I thought that was gorgeous.
Oh, I thought that part was great.
Okay.
I liked, there was some parts of the sequence that I enjoyed, but I think it's just a nitpicky thing for me. And I've had it as a problem with, everything Game of Thrones so far, is that for me, the dragon riding stuff just doesn't feel like it's quite there yet to justify the amount of use that it gets. But I do understand at the same time that in order to improve, they need to do it more often. So, it's give and take. I did think that when what's his name, eye patch kid, Aemond, when he was, is it Aemond? Is there a D at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, so Aemond, when he claimed Laena's dragon, is that Rhaegar?
I think it's Rhaegar. Yeah.
I thought that scene was great, and that when he was like climbing the dragon, I thought that was the best thing that they had done so far with the dragons. But yeah,
even the riding, like once he was actually on Rhaegar.
I think so. At least it didn't stand out to me as much, but I also just don't remember it that well. But maybe I was just like, oh, this is cool. So for me, it was kind of the rule of cool where, oh, this thing's awesome, so I'll kind of excuse it. Whereas I didn't really have that kind of wow feeling when they were going through the clouds, because that's just, like I said, it's a bit of a pet peeve for me when they try and hide their bad CG with more bad CG.
Yeah.
That's just, I see it too often, and sometimes I think it ruins the shot.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, it can take you out of it, right? Like, whatever emotional weight they've been building towards can just be completely like undercut by like, what am I even looking at, right?
Yeah, that's sort of what, because I also just couldn't see shit as well. I'm like, what is going on right now? And it was also late and I was a little tired. So, that's also a factor, of course.
I would say, to kind of go on the other side of it, in terms of that dragon chase scene, the way it was shot, I actually enjoyed, from a standpoint of it feeling very jarring and claustrophobic. Like, when they were up close and getting like pummeled with rain, right? It was very anxiety inducing, which I think kind of helped with that scene.
That's fair. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, some of my highlights, like, I'm right there with you on like the Viserys throne room scene. I actually I quite enjoyed the episode 8 or 9 as a whole. I keep doing that. the like direct aftermath of Viserys's death, right? And um the tension you can feel all throughout King's Landing of like these people moving in the shadows and them finally enacting their plan that they talked about. That table slam scene
Oh, that was good. That was a
when
good
he
moment.
kills when Kristen Cole kills
The dad from Fleabag, as I will
yeah,
refer to him as.
the dad from Fleabag, because I don't
I'm
remember his name right now. So
Yeah, but I'm sure that was also for like a lot of people that watched Fleabag. That was probably a big like, oh, big moment. They're like, oh no,
not him, not
not
Bill
him,
Patterson.
anybody but him.
Lord Beesbury, I think his name was. Yeah, what else? I really enjoyed uh, the Valerian family. I really enjoyed
Mm,
Corlys. He was one of my favorite characters.
yep.
Um, I loved the he can keep his tongue scene in the throne room with
Oh yeah.
what's his name? Corlys's brother. That was a fantastic scene as well.
R.I.P.
Um,
again.
R.I.P. And what else? I'm just looking at the episode list here. There was a lot that went on. I think if I were to try and find a low light, it wasn't like I wasn't a huge fan of the time jumps. I did get
Mm,
used to it as they went on, and I can understand it from a storytelling standpoint of like they had to do that in order to tell the story they wanted
yeah,
to. And I think like looking back at it, it works. Looking overall at the whole thing, um, it was just a little jarring at
yeah. I
first.
think especially the first one as well, because
Yeah.
after the second episode, right when they do that big buildup of the crab feeder, and
Mhm.
then they're like, oh, now it's 2 years later, they've been
Yeah.
fighting all this time. You're like, what? I
Totally.
thought that we were just building up to this cool like fight that we were going to have with this guy, and that was going to be like, oh, that's the season. But no,
Yeah.
they do like a little bait and switch with you, and then it
Yeah. They
gets
could have
resolved very quickly in the next
very
episode.
quickly. Yeah. Yeah. That I think I'll kind of piggyback off of your gripe with that battle as well, because I would have loved to see Damon and the crab feeder actually fight,
Yeah,
right? Instead of them just going into a cave and you hear like cartoon fighting sounds.
yeah, basically. Like I get what
Um,
they were going for, and they're just trying to just show how badass Damon is by having him
yeah.
basically steamroll this guy in a
Mhm.
single episode, and sort of build his character up from
And
there
commit a war crime while doing it.
and commit a war
He
crime. But
fa-
he
he
did
fakes
cut that
the
dude
surrender.
clean in half, and
Yeah, he
that was
did.
impressive.
It was impressive. We didn't see it, but it
But
was
we saw
insidious.
half of it.
We did see half of him get dragged out. Um, yeah, I don't have that many lowlights, honestly. Like I was really pleased with this whole show. The amount of work, it was just really nice to see these this level of gray characters across the entire cast. Like no
Yeah,
one was like starkly good, starkly evil, right? Like everyone was kind of a little bit like makes some dodgy calls here and there, right?
yeah. But everybody has like a clear motive, and it's not just out of evilness or
Yeah,
malice or
exactly.
anything. Like
Yeah, they're
everybody's,
understandable motivations, right?
yeah, everybody is sympathetic to a degree.
Totally. Um, do you have any like notes on like narrative or the like characters or the actors at all?
Uh, I think they did a really good job at casting the different actors to age up
Totally.
each other. Specifically, Alicent. I think both of the actresses that played Alicent were like incredible, and
Mhm.
they also carried over a lot of the nuances that the character had. Like
Yeah.
it felt like one person,
Hmm.
whereas you watch something like Shazam, and you've got, the kid Billy and then the
Oh,
superhero Shazam, and they're like total opposite
yeah.
personalities and mannerisms and everything, and it doesn't feel the same at all. But they
Hmm.
did a really good job at making the character change fluid in that regard, at least.
Yeah.
I will say I wasn't a huge fan of the young Rhaenyra.
Oh, really?
I mean, like, she was fine, but I think when they aged up, I enjoyed the character a lot better, and I thought the performance was a lot stronger. But I think that also just has to do with the material that they had to work with in the first few episodes, because when Rhaenyra is young, she's basically just like, she's just got to make a bunch of mistakes because that's what the prophecy dictates, and that's sort of like her character motivation is just to mess up a bunch and also want to fuck her uncle and fuck everybody. She's just like, her whole character arc in
She's a
that
horny
point is just like, she's just
teenager.
a horny teenager, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is our protagonist, okay. But then things get a little more interesting when the politics and the marriage and everything comes into it, and then when there's the two sets of children, I thought was good. A little obvious with the dark hair versus
yeah.
Although, like, I don't really understand how that works if, like, every other Targaryen could marry, like, somebody of another house with different hair colors,
right.
and it's
What
always turns out white.
I think what I think the argument is more so is that the strong genes are just really freaking strong.
I guess
Stronger than
so.
Targaryen, but I don't know.
But Targaryens, like, they all have white hair, no matter
Yeah.
who the other parent is.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe it's also just like a father thing. If it's,
Yeah, maybe.
I don't
Who
know. I
knows?
just
I don't
thought that
know
was,
how
yeah,
Westeros genetics work.
yeah.
Um,
Who knows?
there is something to be said though about that, like how like they maybe kind of tweaked the mechanics of how it works in the world, right, for the sake of the story. Um, I mean, as soon as you go along with it, though, like it's super captivating and intriguing, right? Like
Yeah,
that whole um, story, well, and like with Corliss's brother in the throne room scene, right? Like there's so much tension riding on this, like, oh, they're bastards. No, they're not. Don't call them that, right?
yeah.
Um,
And at least with them, as opposed to the Lannisters in Game of Thrones, there's a very, like, obvious visual reasoning for people to assume that. Whereas with the Lannisters, like, you maybe wouldn't, like, people wouldn't have noticed it as much if Ned or John Allen hadn't figured it out. But it's
right.
kind of like obvious, especially with what's the dude's name that Rhaenyra married that ran away?
Oh, oh man, he's not going to be on the first page of IMDb. I'm
No,
going to have
I
to
don't
dig.
remember. But anyway, it's like,
Corliss's son.
yeah. Um, Obviously, with these kids having dark hair and being very light skinned,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's going to think, like, okay, these are fucking bastards, like,
Yeah,
obviously. So that it makes sense why that accusation would be so obvious to a lot of people.
yeah.
And it's a real hard one to defend as well.
Yeah, it's like no, of course not.
Oh, no, it's not.
What would make you think such a thing?
It doesn't look like the other guy that I spend all my
Yeah,
time with.
yeah, exactly. Um, all right. I guess we could move on to creator's goal, and it. Do you think they achieved that goal
Um, I
with the
mean, I
show?
think so. I think at least what I could gain from it is they wanted to, keep one foot in the door of the Game of Thrones world and make it feel like it's a part of the same universe, which they did, which, obviously aided by the fact that they used a lot of the same sets and
Yeah.
costuming and all that, all the
Same intro
locations.
too. Intro music.
Same intro song, although I kind of wish they had swapped
I
it out, but
also I also would have.
it would have been a big risk if the song was bad.
Yeah.
So,
True.
at least we
If it
got a
ain't
new
broke,
animation
I
with it.
guess. Yeah.
So, but that's also part of, like, the Game of Thrones branding. So to a degree, I like, okay, we get it. It's Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But they also did a good job at still distancing themselves and making sure that this exists as its own thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they did that by, the storyline is a lot more focused as it's just on the Targaryens. We don't have, characters over in Essos, characters in the north, characters down south, characters in the Midlands, blah, blah, blah. Most of it's happening in King's Landing or with characters that are connected to very closely. So it all feels very localized, and true, that can be good or bad depending on what your preference is, but it is different from Game of Thrones. So it does it in, it maintains its uniqueness in that regard, that it doesn't, get too expansive, because in some of the middle seasons of Game of Thrones, there was just so many storylines going on at once that you're like, the characters that you wanted to see would hardly get any screen time.
You might
But
not
at this
even see
time,
that episode, right?
yeah, they might not even be in that episode. But here, for the most part, almost everybody was in on every episode, except for some storylines. Characters would exit but then come back in, like Rhaenys and Corlys sort of dipped out for a good chunk of the middle, but then came back, and also they didn't try and just recreate all the archetypes of characters. Like they weren't like, okay, we need to get ourselves a new Littlefinger, we need to have ourselves a new Ned, we need to do this, and they weren't trying to like fill in the same characters like Seth MacFarlane does with every single one of his TV shows. Where you're like, okay, we got the family temple. Here's the funny animal, the asshole dad, the hot mom,
the weird
kids,
creature,
and, whatever. So everybody was their own person and their own character, and they felt, unique. And I think
they brought something fresh to the table.
It brought something fresh and unpredictable, because we're not just going to see the same arc happen for these characters like we saw last show. I was going to say last season, but not last season.
I will also say too, any characters that are close in like archetype still, like, their performances like outweigh the fact that they're like closely, like, because I mean, you did bring up there's no Littlefinger, but I mean there kind of is.
Yeah, well, he's kind of like a combination of Varys and Littlefinger.
Yeah,
a little
totally.
bit.
Yeah, but like his performance is amazing, and he does it so well. So he's a great character to watch.
Yeah,
no matter
and just
like how much you don't like him.
His characterization is different from both of those people, although his character sort of serves the same purpose in the, as like the schemer.
Right. Yeah.
But that's about it. Like, he's a very different person.
Yeah.
And he has different motives. He seems
to only
be
label him as the schemer would be like derivative.
Yeah. He seems to be very self-motivated, but he also has, some kind of grander goal that we haven't really found out yet. So
yeah.
Looking forward. He's one of the characters that I'm most intrigued to see what comes of in the future.
Go forward. Yeah, me too. There's a few other characters too that you still don't know their full motivations, and if they're just really good, like the Hand of the King.
Yeah, he's great.
Hightower. Like, I'm
great.
Still not sure if he's entirely like made himself believe that he is in service to the kingdom, or if he is like, he has like that secret ulterior motive of like, no, I just want the Hightower house eventually on the throne, right?
Yeah.
Oh no,
we don't know yet.
The another thing I wanted to bring up, kind of more, or going back to highlights and lowlights, the Song of Ice and Fire and the dagger. I was I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this, but I was again pleasantly surprised, because when they first introduced that, I think it was like, what, episode 1 or 2 or something?
It was episode 1. It was like the very end of the episode.
Right, yeah. I was a little nervous. I'm like, oh no, they're trying to tie it back into Game of Thrones. But I think they utilized it and they made it actually pay off and integrate it into the story. It actually served a purpose rather than just being a throwaway, like, hey, remember that terrible season of television we made.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the
I mean,
dagger?
I agree with all that you said. I think they did a good job of tying it in, and obviously you see how these are linked stories, and
Right.
it's the one sort of thread that's really tying them together. But I just thought, the way that they brought it up in the first episode very much was like, oh, hey, remember this?
Yeah, that's fair.
We have this prophecy. You need
Yeah,
to do this prophecy now. You're in charge. This
right.
is the prophecy. Here we go. And it was very just like spell it out and
Right.
not subtle. And
Maybe
it's,
could have been reworked a couple
yeah,
times.
it's like that is something that you didn't need to dump in the first episode. Like he could
No.
have slowly fed that to his daughter over the course of the first 4 episodes when she's young.
Yeah.
Because they don't really mention it again until she's older.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all this like meandering time in the like episode 2 and 3, maybe even 4. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
The middle episodes get kind of jumbled for me, but yeah, those other few episodes after the pilot, I just thought there was like too much just beating around the bush, and they could have been progressing the story a little bit more fluidly between the episodes rather than just dumping all of that stuff in the first episode and then sort of just waiting for the wheel to start turning.
Mm-hmm. Uh, yeah. So that now going back to creator goal, I think they did really well on kind of what you were talking about with making it distinct enough, making the show distinct enough and unique enough, bringing something fresh uh, to the show that was much needed after Game of Thrones. I think they stuck the landing,
I'd
and
say so.
yeah. I do you think you will rewatch it before season 2 comes out? I know it. I think it's coming out in 2024.
Probably not.
No.
It depends, but I've gotten to the point where I have so many things in my queue that just the prospect of rewatching stuff at this point, I'm just like, I'll maybe rewatch it in preparation for the last season. I'll
Mm-hmm.
rewatch everything up to that point, or I'll wait until it's done and then just
One
rewatch.
more time. There you
Yeah,
go.
I will rewatch the whole thing in one go when it is finished. But I've
Yeah.
tried to do that multiple times with Game of Thrones, and I have never gotten past season 6 when I've tried to rewatch it. I just stop after Battle of the Bastards, and I'm like, okay, that's
I
where it
mean,
ends.
that's a good.
John kills the Night King after this,
Yep.
and Arya kills Cersei, and everybody lives happily ever after.
Yeah. Exactly. And Danny gets the Iron Throne.
Oh no, and John kills Dany, of course,
Oh, okay.
and then John becomes king.
Keeping that part. Okay.
Yeah, that part was always meant to be. He should have killed Dany before he killed the Night King, because
Oh,
he
okay.
had to, christen the sword with the blood of his wife, as told in the
Ah.
prophecy that they decided to
That
just skip.
they left in the dirt.
Yeah, because they wanted to surprise people instead of make logical storytelling decisions.
Instead of follow through on their storytelling.
We can't get into this though, because
No,
that's
no,
a
no,
whole
no,
other
no.
video. That's a whole other
No.
video.
Yeah. I am interested to see how long this show goes on for. Like,
I think they said 5 seasons, right?
did they?
I think
Okay.
so.
I thought. I mean, it might also be Rings of Power, but like I remember seeing that for Rings of Power, they were like
That is also true.
5 seasons. So, yeah, maybe it was
Who knows?
confirmed for that as well. Who knows?
I don't know how they're going to get 5 seasons out of this, though. I feel
Yeah,
like this
well,
could
and
be
I was just gonna say, like, I'd be happy with like 3 seasons.
Yeah, I think 2 more would do it. Is
Yeah,
depending on how many more time jumps they're going to do. Like, because if we're going to run through Rhaenyra getting to old age,
right. That's
I don't
true.
know. I don't know how old she is when she dies. I have some friends that have read the books,
Hmm.
or Fire and Blood at least,
Yeah.
and they know everything that's going to go down. I don't. I'm in the dark. So
Hey, I'm right there with you.
who knows, boy?
Who knows?
Somebody's got to
We'll wait
have
and see.
a kid. Whose kid is it going to be at some point to carry on down the line?
Exactly. Yeah. Will we stay with Rhaenyra until old age? Will Rhaenyra like be killed off and we follow the kids?
Yeah, I don't know what the end point is going to be of this story. I don't know
Yeah,
what the end is.
it'll.
So,
Well, I'm assuming it would be the ultimate demise of House Targaryen, right? It would be, I guess, like, because where is Dany and
well,
her brother in the
this
beginning?
is 200 years before that. So if we do that far, then we're going to go through two
If
more.
we do the full 200 years.
We might go through two, maybe three more generations of characters
Oh
before we get to
God.
that point. And that I
Oh
think would be
God.
a little bit.
That would be a bit much, I
That
think.
might be a little bit much.
Yeah.
Because then,
That's.
like, that means we've got like maybe one season per set of characters.
Oh God. I don't
It
want
would
to
be
think about
interesting
that.
though, because I guess if they keep having kids and everything, there would always be like an overlap.
Yeah.
So who knows? I think that could be a really interesting concept if they
It
were
is.
to pull that off.
Yeah.
I know
In
there's some
theory.
show, I forget what it's called, but my friend was telling me about it, that is basically like it's going to be like a 5-season show that follows these two sisters throughout their entire lives.
Wow.
And then it just goes from them being like kids in the first few seasons, and then each one is like a chunk of their life. And I think right now they're like 30 years old or something, and it's going to go up to when they're 70. And I thought, that's a really cool way to do a show and to tell a story.
Totally. Yeah. Definitely a unique concept. It's just a matter of sticking that landing, I guess.
Yeah, and having consistent acting across all of
Yeah.
the seasons as well.
Yeah. I think the strong uh, boys, well, boy now, I guess. Although there's two. Spoiler alert. Uh, left a bit to be desired on the acting end. I mean, they haven't had a ton to work with so far. I think the dinner table scene was pretty good, but I think it was
It was
definitely
okay.
more. It was. I was more invested in the Targaryens than the other Targaryens, the strong Targaryens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. If they have consistent acting, then that's half the workload, really.
But I do also understand that if they keep rotating these actors, then it makes them not have to pay them as much money, because the more that you have an actor returning season after season, their paycheck goes up. But if you
That
keep
is true.
hiring new people, you can keep the wages super low and spend it more on dragon riding.
Exactly. Spend it more on half-ass CG.
Yes, hopefully maybe 3/4 ass next season.
Fingers crossed.
We'll get there one day.
Um, cool. All right. Well, to kind of wrap it up, then, do you want to give like 2 to 3 in total pros and cons for the show?
Okay. Pros, I think, the cinematography was pretty great across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you compare it to season 1 of Game of Thrones. Like, Game of Thrones season 1 was good, but it really didn't come into its own as, the show that people remember until about halfway through season 2, and then 3 and 4, I think, is sort of like the golden age.
Mm-hmm.
So putting season 1 of this up against season 1 of Game of Thrones, I think this is a much better starting point. Um, and I think, we only have further to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think the characters are very interesting, and they leave a lot of directions on where the show will go. And I think the physical, like the prosthetics that they did and the practical effects, I think were fantastic
Mm-hmm.
in the season, which were very heavy in the first few episodes. But yeah, I think the makeup team for sure is going to walk away with an Emmy this year.
Totally. Yeah,
I
I
think there's
agree.
going to be a few Emmys going to this show
Mm-hmm.
this year.
Yeah, I'd be
Uh,
surprised if. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll go for it. I was going to go into cons, but you can say something
Um,
about that first.
I would be surprised if Patty Considine, is that how you say his last name?
Constantine.
Patty Constantine, that's the one. If he doesn't get, at the very least, nominated for an Emmy,
Oh, he's going to
and
get a
take home the Emmy.
nomination for that. Because I think for acting, they do it by episode, right? They'll do a
Uh,
specific
I
episode
think
that they're
so.
nominated for. Same with writing, I believe,
Okay.
in the Emmys.
I'm not as familiar with the Emmy process.
Yeah, me neither. I don't really watch award shows at all.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I just like when the things that I want to win. If it's
Yeah,
not that, I don't care.
yeah. Um, so your cons now?
My cons was they blew their load a little bit early on all the action and stuff. I think they
Mm.
should have saved some of that for the end and maybe
Hmm.
started a little bit slower. Um, and then, yeah, the time jumps. Uh, I think some of them could have been done a little bit better because there was also the second one after the throwdown in the ballroom during, what was it, the wedding? Is that what
Yes.
that event was?
Yes.
When the Kingsguard dude, what's his name
Yeah,
again?
beats his face in.
He beats
Kristen
dude's
Cole.
face in, and then they don't mention it again. It's like, is there no repercussions? Did they question him why he did that? Did he have to stand trial? Like, what was his reasoning that he gave for doing that? And they just never touch on it. And then the next time they're like, it's been 10 years now. Let's forget about that
Buckle
part.
up, bitches.
So I just, I feel like they used the time jumps to sort of skip over some storytelling and
Mm,
just like were used as an excuse a little bit.
yeah.
Whereas it felt like some of the storylines at the time of the time jump were not resolved. And then they just forgot about them
Yeah.
by the end. Is like an excuse to make things not wrap up properly. Because they're like,
Hmm.
whatever.
We
That people
could
can just
spend
assume.
time, like getting into the nitty gritty of the repercussions for all these different events that happens in the first few episodes, or we could just time jump a bunch and then get to where we want to go.
Yeah. Because like the whole thing was they wanted to blackmail Crispin
Yeah.
because of his relationship with the queen. But then when the other guy gets killed, then sort of the bargaining power that Crispin would have had is gone because the dude is dead now. So
Yeah.
he could have just outed Crispin for
Yeah.
that and nothing would have come of it because the dude's already dead.
Right.
And they would not be able to prove by trial or anything if he was fucking the prince or anything because his head's gone, his face
Yeah.
mashed in.
Yeah.
So that part bothered me quite a bit. That's thinking back to the low moments. The
Hmm.
lack of resolution to that storyline
Hmm.
was a very low one and possibly the lowest for me. And I know my friend that read the book was also very disappointed in that because apparently that's very different from what happens in the book.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and he's like, yeah, I don't know how they're going to wrap up and like do that storyline now. Because apparently how it happened in the book was Crispin killed him accidentally in a jousting match in a tournament. And it
Oh,
wasn't like a premeditated assault.
yeah.
So I don't really know why they felt the need to change it if they weren't even going to follow through on that, like on the repercussions of what the change meant.
Right.
So it's just kind of like a, huh?
Yeah. Maybe use that to have Kristen Cole snap and uh, then like make him further developed as an antagonist and be on Allison's side a bit more. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that reasoning makes sense, but just the lack of consequences, I feel like, is too much of a. I can't suspend my disbelief enough to let that
Right.
one slide.
That's fair.
What about
Yeah.
you?
I
What are
think.
your pros and cons?
Thank you so much, Matt, for asking me that
You're
question.
welcome.
um, it's going to be a lot of piggybacking. I think honestly, uh,
I picked a lot
I
of low hanging fruit, to be fair.
my kind of cheap shot is just a pro is being pleasantly surprised with how this season turned out. I'm really happy that I enjoyed it as much as I did. All of the characters were like super compelling, and the cast really made sure of that. The cast was fantastic across the board, I think. And the leads did, like, I guess, I mean, it is kind of an ensemble, but like if you want to narrow it down to like Alicent and Rhaenyra, like those two actresses were fantastic throughout the whole show across both timelines, time
Yeah.
periods. Um, and I'll agree on the uh, weird distribution of action throughout the show. I think it was still compelling to me for the most part every episode because of the characters and how they were written.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite episodes that was the string in the middle where there was no fighting and no action going on, and it was just character development and plot. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is great. Like, we could have done this in the first few episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The standouts in terms of action, like Rhaenys, uh, like erupting out of the dragon pit. I like gasped out loud. I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh shit!" Um, and the battle at the stepstones, like the sequences were cool, but the execution of some of it was a little lackluster. Um, yeah, that's not much more unique to say. Really, I agree with you on most of your points. Really.
And I agree with you on
Oh,
most of
let's just
yours.
all agree with each other, shall
Let's
we?
agree to agree.
Let's agree to agree. So recommendations. Who would you recommend this to if you were to recommend it at all?
I'd say, if you liked Game of Thrones, give it a shot. It's not the same, but it's still good. If you didn't watch Game of Thrones, watch this instead of Game of Thrones. And then if you
Mhm.
like this, watch Game of Thrones
Yeah,
afterwards. Or if you
like
just,
Matt, maybe halt right at season 6.
yeah,
It's all roses and rainbows
yeah,
after that for
after,
that.
ended at season 6, and then anything that you think of, your head canon will be better.
Exactly.
It'll be better.
Exactly.
Um, and if you just like good TV, if you like fantasy, if you like spectacle,
Hmm.
if you like good characters and drama, like it's all there.
Morally great characters and
Yeah, morally great
lots of tension.
characters, lots of tension, lots of well-rounded cast, very well-written female characters. Um,
Totally.
there is a lot of feminist overtones to the show as well, talking about the patriarchy and the commodification of women and how they're all just treated to be married around, and they can't really do their own thing, and it's very modern in a way that they're doing storytelling,
Mm.
relating it to themes that we're talking about today. But
Yeah.
also, it is stuff that still would be relevant, and there's not just like forcing in um, modern thematic elements into this old story. It's stuff that, like, yeah, obviously they would have, like, women wouldn't have just been going along, you know, just doing whatever, um,
Yeah. Being
and
completely complicit the
and
whole
being
time.
complicit the whole time.
Yeah. I that was another thing I was worried about when one of the first trailers dropped and there was that like narration talking about like, oh, a queen will never sit on the Iron Throne, right? Or a woman will never be queen or whatever. That drew up a little bit of worry in it being just a shoehorned in, like, super flat two-dimensional, like, oh, a woman can't be a leader, and then just it never amounts to more than that. But I think they definitely integrated it into the story of this show a lot better. um and it had actual weight to it among the several uh like cast members that or characters that were women. Um, so yeah, I would also recommend it if you're into intriguing uh, fantasy drama, and if you like Game of Thrones, give this a shot as well. It is a welcome surprise, as I have said many a time this past 50 minutes.
Very welcome. Very surprised.
Such welcome, many surprise. Matt, you are on Letterboxd, are you not?
I am on Letterboxd.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
You can follow me on Letterboxd if you
This
want
is
to
the
either
plug
search.
section if this was not clear at all to anybody.
If you want to search for my name, it will be Matt Schmidt, or you can just type http://www.letterboxd.com/wisdom nugget, and you will also find me in the same place there via that string of letters into your search bar.
Fantastic. I wrote it down just to be sure.
Okay. Yeah. Wrote it down for the listeners to hear.
Yeah, I wrote it down for the listeners to hear. And then, do you have any other recommendations at all?
Check out All Quiet on the Western Front on Netflix.
Yeah.
I really wish that this got a wider theatrical run and more people could see it in a theater like I did, because it was a great experience to see it on a big screen with, great audio. And I feel like while it is still a film that is strong enough to stand on its own from a home viewing experience, it's still it's not going to be the same, especially with it being, in a foreign language. There's going to be a lot of people that come into it and do not give it the attention that it would have deserved.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a great war film, maybe the best World War I film or war film in general that I've seen in the 21st century.
Oh my goodness.
Which is high praise. I liked it better than 1917. I know that might be a hot take for some people.
There's the pull quote for the box art.
Yeah.
Is it will get a physical release for sure.
Oh yeah. But just, for me, I want to see grit, and I don't want to see heroism, and I don't want to see glorification of war. And I think 1917, for my taste, was a little bit too fun and too much of a little adventure movie.
Mm-hmm.
For what I want to see in war, because war fucking sucks. It is not an adventure. It is not you go along with your buddy and have fun and do all this cool stuff and you get to be a hero at the end of the day. It is or at least in this case of World War I, it was you go down in the trenches with your friends and you all fucking die. Mm-hmm. And it's not glorious. You're in the mud. It happens so quickly. You don't get to be a hero. It's over in a second. And yeah.
That's it.
That's it. So
go watch it, everybody.
Go watch it, but don't watch it with your kids. And there's some pretty brutal moments and some pretty sad moments as well.
Good to know. I can't wait to watch it.
Have you not seen it? I thought you went to see it.
Oh no, it didn't. It left theaters before I could go. Plus, it was like only playing during the day. So
yeah, well, it played one theater in Vancouver, and then I think it played only in LA and New York in the US because it was so limited.
You are a lucky duck.
I'm a lucky few. And I went on like the second night and there was less than 20 people there.
Wow.
But it seems, at least now from the Netflix release, there are a lot of people watching it, and a lot of other people are echoing me in saying that it is very good and people are enjoying it. And I'm glad, because I was thinking that it was going to go sort of under the radar and people weren't going to give it any recognition, but people are watching it.
Happy to be proven wrong.
They're going to be proven wrong, or I'm going to be proven wrong, I guess.
Cool. And that's it for plugs. Nothing else? No Twitter, socials?
Nah, I don't use Twitter.
That's honestly for the best. For
probably. You know what? I'm happy that Elon bought it, because he's simultaneously destroying Twitter from the inside, and he's also just like hemorrhaging his own money at the same time. So I think in the grand scheme of things, he's doing the world a big favor right now.
And speaking of doing the world a big favor, I just finished my God of War Ragnarok Let's Play series on my gaming YouTube channel. That is my plug. And that was the best segue I've ever done.
That is great.
Yeah, I completed that. I played all the mainline God of War games. It's all up on my YouTube channel now. We're 7 days away from God of War Ragnarok. The hype is real. So go check that out if you're into gameplay stuff. But if not, then you can follow me on the socials. It's either NoScore or NoScore Reviews on pretty much everything. Twitter, Letterboxd, Facebook, Twitch, but I don't stream yet. I'll get there eventually if I ever get the time. But yeah, that's going to do it for this NoScore review show. Matt, thank you so much for joining me this fine evening.
And thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure to see you and hear you this time. Or sorry,
other
hear
way
you
around.
And see you. Other way around. Words. Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening to this episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.